Hello and welcome to our live webinar, Build Trust from the Start, Email Marketing Onboarding Best Practices. My name is Maike and I'm responsible for the marketing and events at the CSA, and I'm here today for your support. I'm here in the background and answer all your questions you have during the webinar for the tool or maybe to the CSA or to the topic today. I'm here for your support today. Maybe you know the CSA or not. Our goal is to increase the quality of commercial emailing. We act as a neutral interface between mailbox providers and senders of commercial emailing. We act as a neutral interface and we establish legal and technical quality standards in cooperation with our partners and of course our certified senders. All these steps ends in our CSA certification that we can offer for you and your business. And if you want to get more information about our daily work and how we can support you, just contact us after the webinar and we will get back to you. We have official partners during the whole year. We are grateful to have Janßen-Holldiek and Kickbox on board. Thank you for your support. And it's the same way as you want information about them, about Janßen-Holldiek or Kickbox. Just download the partner booklet. It might be on the right on your screen. Download it, contact them, and get more information about their services. And we have some housekeeping rules for today. Please note that you're muted during the whole webinar. You can ask your questions by using the chat function. It might be also on the right on your screen. Just send them to organizer and we will answer your questions. And of course, our speakers will answer your questions today. And we have a challenge for you. Share your key facts, learnings, or takeaways. Share them on social media, tag us, or use our hashtag. And yeah, let us know what you learned today from our session. And I'm glad I can hand over now to our CSI director, Julia, who is our co-host today. And you will hear me at the end of the session again.
Thank you very much, Mike, and a warm welcome from my side to our webinar of today, Build Trust from the Start, Email Marketing Onboarding Best Practices. I'm pretty excited to co-host this webinar today because this topic has been around for so many years and it's still highly relevant today and it will remain relevant. The process of pre-vetting customers, the process of the onboarding and the actual decision whether to onboard a customer or not, and then the continuous post-vetting or vetting during a business relationship is crucial to the reputation of the ESP, and this is also our core business. So we actually have a highly relevant topic today, but we also have very, very experienced people talking about it, an international panel, which I would like to introduce to you now. Now, let me start with the introduction of our first speaker for today. He's very passionate about all email-related technologies and well-known in the industry. He's the founder and CEO of 2 companies, Mailkit and Omnivery. And he was actually a film editor until he fully immersed in the world of email marketing. Jakub, Olexa. Woohoo! Let's pretend we're on stage, you know. Our next panelist.
Good morning.
Hi, Jakub. Nice you're here. Our next panelist has over 25 years of high-tech engineering experience. He's the CTO of the company eHawk and a founding member of SURBL. And he visited Jakub's hometown for wine tasting recently after he has played as a DJ on the national radio in his previous life. Raymond Dijkxhoorn. Yay! Yeah, it's really working. Thanks for being here, Raymond. Nice to have you. Our last speaker and moderator of this session used to play soccer in the Division 1 and has 4-year-old twins. She works as a chief marketing officer at SocketLabs and is dutifully continuously serving the email industry with a strong focus on email strategy, deliverability, and compliance. Lauren Meyer, welcome, Lauren. Hi.
Hello,
And Lauren,
everyone.
I can actually remember you being on a panel about this topic. It must have been something like 8 to 10 years ago. So you're a true expert on this, and it seems like you're just the perfect moderator for the session.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a little bit too nice, I would say. But anyway, I appreciate it, Julia. Thanks. Should we kick it off? Get this going?
Yeah, of course. Take it away.
All right, let's do it. All right, so hello everyone in the audience. I think today we're going to start the conversation with the pre-vetting. So we're going to talk about what it is, why it matters, how it works, all of that good stuff. In this section, we're going to get into some of the differences between the pre-vetting process for the self-serve, or maybe you call it a freemium model, when compared to how this looks for companies that are supporting enterprise customers, where there's always pretty much a sales team that's involved in that. Next, we're going to talk about the onboarding process. There is a very delicate balance that you need to strike between making your customers have everything that they need to get started, but also making sure that you're effectively protecting the company from risk. Hopefully you've got a really strong vetting process in place to keep out those bad actors while you're simultaneously kind of rolling out that red carpet for your good customers. But there are going to be times where the onboarding goes totally sideways anyway. Maybe your new customer was holding back some key details about their sending practices during that vetting process. Maybe the handoff from sales to your customer-facing team was a little bit less than perfect. Maybe somebody just made a mistake. It really doesn't matter once the damage has been done. So we're here to talk today about ways that you can improve this entire process. Finally, we're going to make sure that we talk about what happens after the vetting and the onboarding. This is going to be how you maintain quality control of your senders and your company's sender reputation. I want to encourage all of you joining this session virtually today to please share your questions throughout the session. Don't save them for the end because we'd really like to kind of tackle some of those live as we're going through those different topics. So just share whatever you got. All right. All right. Well, should we get started, folks? Starting with that pre-vetting. Raymond, do you maybe want to kick us off by sharing a little bit about why vetting new customers matters so much? Looks like you might be on mute.
Yeah, thank you.
There we go.
So, was not muted by me, but it works now. Yeah, so I think it's really important. It basically starts by knowing your customer. I mean, if you circle back like 20 years, basically you found out because you ended up in some of the well-known spam block lists, and that's usually too late, right? So I think some of the actors that every ESP has seen, well, at least once, I guess, they tend to move around, and how hard you make it on your end for them to get in, they will just go to your competitor, which is likely fine by you, right? So, but in the end, and that's also why the eHawk project was started. If you want to do this like alone, it might work. You might see something, but you only see the data of your own customers. So you don't have a lot of experience about like the whole complete set of data there yet. But it helps, and I would highly recommend like work together with all of your colleagues, because if you share that information, you might be happy that he basically starts to attack your competitor, but they will eventually get back, right? So it is something that you do together, I think.
I would say the same. Yeah, I think it's critically important for customers to know that their email program is not going to be affected by other senders who may not be, I don't know, as skilled of senders, right? So if everybody's sending from the same IP pools or the same range, even maybe if they're sharing the same DKIM domain, you're not going to effectively be keeping spammers and fraudsters off your platform, and they can severely impact performance for the whole bunch. And you really don't want to make your customer-facing teams explain to your best or biggest customers that their emails are blocked because, I don't know, Sally's silly sender decided to get too excited and blasted to her entire list. And oh, by the way, that list is purchased. There really isn't an easy way to tell someone that you're doing great, but because we allowed a couple of bad actors onto our platform, you need to accept a negative hit to your performance. Hopefully we can get those emails back into the inbox as soon as possible, right? Yeah, they just want you to fix it. Unfortunately, most of the time that is really not as easy as the folks that are tuning in today really well know.
It's really easy to it's really easy to cripple your reputation. It's really hard to get it back up to par again.
It is, yeah, and I think that's, a lot of times people don't realize, like, you can make one or two mistakes very quickly, very easily. Those are fine, but if you have this pattern of kind of bad practices, things that are going to hurt your reputation, that's really not going to work for the inbox placement. All right, so as we jump in here, let's talk about how the vetting process looks for companies with a self-serve model, sometimes called that freemium model, versus how it looks for the companies that are supporting enterprise customers. Let's start with the enterprise model, since it's a little bit less of a wild west, if you will. So Jakub, I know that your company is offering enterprise solutions. Can you walk us through what that vetting process looks like for Mailkit and Omnivory?
Yeah, so for us, this is very much a process that we do way before we even start talking to a potential customer. We do a heavy pre-vetting just to avoid our sales teams to just go out, spend time and start talking to potential customers that we would later turn down. And for that, we use a bunch of tools. It could be eHawk, it's data from Spamhaus, from like, give me data and I want it. And for that very reason, we built our own spam trap network, started 15 years ago, and we keep building it just to have coverage and have insight that we couldn't get any other way. But it's not only about mail-related data for us. For the pre-vetting, you also want to look at fairly distant information, like what is the reputation of that brand in general? Like, are they making false claims on their Facebook, or false advertisements in ads or anywhere? Like, anything that stands out is really important for us. We're looking at stuff like, if it's an e-commerce site, like what is the customer rating of that site, right? Because if the idea is, if they have a low rating, or customer rating is low, then those customers are more likely to complain and report their messages as spam, which will have a negative impact on reputation. So we're not looking just at email, we're looking at everything that can give us an idea about the customer. And the other thing is also, when we start talking to that customer, how truthful they are. We present them with a standard pre-vetting form. They give us some answers, then we do a lot of digging. But if they're open about knowing their issues and what they want to change, and that they will change it, and they're willing to change it, then we can discuss what are the ways how we could help them, what they need to do, what would be the requirements from our end to offer them a contract. But if they say, we love the way we do it now, but we have bad deliverability and our current ESP is not helping us, so we want to just change the ESP hoping that the problem will go away, we're not interested, because the problem will not go away. So that's pretty much our pre-vetting process for the enterprise.
Yeah, I really like that. I think my favorite part of that is that you're not just saying yes or no based on their practices and their history. It also, you have to factor in whether they're willing to improve their practices, right? Are they aware of the fact that there's a problem that needs to be solved, or needs to be improved? Are they willing to work with you and kind of play by the rules that you're setting, that the mailbox providers are setting, that SURBL is setting all these rules, right? So yeah, I really love that. Raymond, anything you want to add on the enterprise vetting side?
Yeah, well, for the enterprise, it it tends to be easier than for freemium. So with enterprise, likely you go after like bigger brands. So they already have some of the practices in place that you expect them to have in place. Sometimes they can be adjusted. Sometimes that's when they move over to a service that like Jakub is providing. But yeah, it's quite different than freemium. For freemium, it's like thousands of signups a day. It can be small companies. And for freemium, you have to look like more for signs where you basically can say, hey, I've seen this one customer, but was it like the only one? Or did they create like $6,000 accounts? Because with freemium, it's a numbers game. So you often see a lot of accounts being created. And once you find a pattern in that, that could be like location or location versus IP addresses. They tend to use VPNs to hide whatever they are doing. They tend to use temporary email services, which is a really bad sign if you're doing like larger customers, because they will not sign up basically with a throwaway address. But if you see those signs, you have to question yourself, like, why is someone using a temporary email service to sign up with my service? Is he really like enthusiastic to hide everything he does on the internet? Or is it just like trying to get into my system and do as much damage as they can and go on to the next one because they have been doing this for years? So yeah, I think the signs are completely different for more bulky signups than basic corporate signups, where you also know a lot more about the customer that you can validate, even if you do it like manually.
I would add that there are certain patterns that are similar for some enterprise customers. We see these big mega senders that are hopping from ESP to ESP. Those are usually, you know, the payday loans, you know, these affiliate senders. Those are large senders. They're not going for premium services. They want enterprise. But there are the patterns, you know, when they contact you, they use Google email instead of a company address. When they fill out the pre-vetting form, you find out that they are located in somewhere middle of Montana in a building where there are 20,000 other businesses. So you start to get these signals, which will ultimately reveal that they are not an marketing agency, as they like to call themselves. So there are some patterns that are similar, and it's the deceptive patterns.
Yeah, that's I think also why it's really important to have talks with your colleagues, because you have seen them. Next week, your other colleague will find out about them. And if you share some information within limits, I mean, sometimes it's personal information, but if it's company information, it might be different. If you share that, especially when they breached your terms of service. So yeah, I think especially the example that Jakub says, like payday loans, those payday loans, if they have one going in, the margins on those are really big, so they can afford larger senders. And they don't necessarily need to go for freemium, because if they sell just a handful, they have a nice business.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, there's the other thing we probably want to touch upon is just the fact that, you know, like you mentioned, you might see a sign up in your platform this week, maybe next week your colleague's going to see one at a different platform. I've also seen a lot of like repeat signups. So you'll have the same bad actor who just comes back and tests your platform over and over again, and they're looking for little bitty holes, right? Maybe they answer a question one way and they get denied. They answer it another way, they get approved, then they get a rate limit. So now they're trying to figure out how to get past that rate limit. So they're constantly kind of trying to work their way through that little baby pieces of cheese you got going on. So you really need to pay attention to kind of what's going on there as well. Cool. All right. So I guess, you know, I think the other thing that I want to call out here is just you know, when you've been through that sales process, I think we're all aware that it's typically very long. It's many steps, right? It's like, you know, the discovery, the demo, a couple of conversations about pricing, maybe legal gets involved, all these things, right? The good news with that is that spammers typically don't waste their time on those really long to set up accounts. They're typically looking for something that's much quicker to do, right? The bad news is that when you do end up with one of those spammers on your platform, it's harder to deal with because they're sending higher volumes to your platform. That could have a, you know, negative impact on your sender reputation. It also could require a little bit more intervention from legal or leadership team or something like that to kind of work out the details of that contract and sort of, you know, remediate them or get them to a, well, get them off the platform, I guess, right? Cool. All right. So I guess maybe let's move on. Metrics. I know we talked about a couple of metrics, but I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into this. Are there certain metrics that you think, and I guess, Raymond, I'm going to jump to you first on this one because you are the co-founder of SURBL, but also the CTO of eHawk. So I'm sure you've seen a lot of cool things here. What are the metrics that people should be checking out when they're trying to catch these bad actors?
Well, the fun thing is, and that's perhaps also like a little bridge to, should you do like a one-time customer vetting or should it be a continuous process? It should obviously be a continuous process because after they sign up, they can do different things with the accounts. But the things they try to do is, it's almost like the catch of the week. If you go to a restaurant, we have the catch of the week. Nice food, nice fish. And it's the same with this. So once they find a hole in your system, they will basically start to abuse that till you plumb that hole. And then they will find something else. The whole science, it could be very simplistic things like which market is your ESP servicing? And if you see signups from a completely different region than you're actually serving, that might be already very strange. It might be the marketing agency in a different country, but if they also, for that same case, sign up with a throwaway address, that's another red flag. So it is basically a matter of how many red flags a customer raises till you can basically say, well, this is so obvious, this will be really bad for us. But some also tend to do it in a pretty nice way. And not to give it away, but like there is so much information online available that you can create like really good looking, almost real accounts. You go to Yellow Pages, you see a lot of info there. You can just create accounts where if you look like 5 years back, those accounts always had something where the street didn't even exist, or you know, a lot easier basically to flag those accounts. And right now it's getting more sophisticated. It will, and let's mention it once this conference, like AI will also do stuff there, because also the funny looking questions that they answer in your sign up process, if you have any of those, they will be really easy to answer for them. So I think there's not like a one sign where always people say like, hey, for spam filtering, is there like words that we should not use or something like that? I think that's a myth, and it's the same for signing up. I mean, it's depending on your business also. If you are doing vetting services, or you try to collect leads or anything like that for a company which basically reaches out to the customer by phone, the email is not really important. If that email is not even working, they don't care, right? So it's depending on the business that you're doing, what data points are really important and what data points should really work. Obviously, for ESPs, the email is key because you're sending email. But some of the other information might not even matter. If you do vetting for a dating site, you can expect throwaway addresses, right? So it's completely depending on what type of industry you're trying to do the vetting on. There's not like a generic profile.
Yeah, I think you touched upon a really important point, which is I think we're all looking for that like smoking gun in every situation where it's like it's always going to be, you know, the velocity, like they're signing up in Europe and they're based in the US, and it's just something that's very simple, or it's, you know, it's going to be just a ton of spam trap hits or something like that. But it really is just more like looking for the one thing that stands out as incorrect or wrong, or just a little bit that kind of makes you raise your eyebrow a little bit. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I guess I'd like to kind of touch on what there's certain things I think that we can automate during the vetting process. I think there's other things that we absolutely probably should not automate. Jakub, I know obviously on the enterprise side, you're dealing with bigger volume contracts. What things would you consider automating as part of your vetting process?
Quite frankly, for us, the only thing that we're automating is the collection of certain data points, like querying blacklists for the domain, querying eHawk, querying Spamhaus to get the reputation, to collect the data. And that's the only thing, because then, as Raymond said, it's not like you have these KPIs that you can just set and forget, and this is how it's going to work. It's not black and white. And I would say that for us, the best metric is the one that is hard to describe, and that is the transparency of that potential customer. If they're transparent, they're not hiding stuff, and they're open, everything goes much better, and it's more likely to end well for them, right? But in the end, it's very much about the human behind the computer who looks at all the data and says, okay, this could work, or no, I'm feeling something fishy. Like, sometimes it's not really about our data, it's just that the amount of data, the way that we received it, the overall feeling that we got simply just doesn't work for us, and we just don't want to pursue that. Like, we've seen customers that were big brands, but they just were still stuck in batch and blast model. And when we asked them about it, they were like, yeah, it works for us.
Guys, I have one question
from rates, right? And then, like, how can you say it works for you when you're not measuring this? Like, that's not something we want to go into, no matter how big of a brand you are.
Guys, I have one question from the audience. Does it require special sales briefing or tools to integrate the client vetting on an early state, or should account management or deliverability already be involved at an early stage? I think that's a very good one.
Oh yeah,
so,
I think that's a great question.
Yeah, in our case, the deliverability team, which does the pre-vetting, has the final say. So the sales cannot go and start any negotiations, do anything without having that lead approved by deliverability. So when there's a prospect coming from a form, which obviously our forms don't allow free mail addresses to be used because we don't want those are not really businesses. But when there is a lead coming in, whether it's through a form, LinkedIn, or a salesperson simply decides, hey, I just saw this brand, this might be interesting. The first thing that the salesperson must do is to get pre-vetted. And once that brand is pre-vetted and approved, then the salesperson can do anything. They can go and pursue that opportunity, not without that approval.
Okay, and related to that, I have one more question for you. You mentioned data services to use for vetting. What are helpful sources or services? You already said that you're using Spamhaus. You talked about eHawk. So maybe apart from that, is there any other sources or services that ESPs can have a look at?
Google.
Facebook.
Google is your friend. Like, really Googling for the brand, for customer experience with the brand, that's really important. And then, you know, of course, you look at all the possible block lists. You look at anything that is tied to the brand. Like,
yeah, I think, you know, at several ESPs I've worked at, we've kind of used like a combination of internal and third-party data points for this. So for example, maybe you're tracking activities internally, such as like repeat signups, as well as maybe you're using a tool like eHawk, or MaxMind is another one that's similar to that, which is configured kind of, you know, exactly to the specifications that you want based on your customer base, your risk tolerance levels, and all that good stuff. And then we're also maybe, you know, incorporating some aspects of payment data from your payment processor. So figure on the enterprise level side, you might not have some of that more automated data that you're going to have through a self-serve sign up. But I think that the trick is you want to ask those questions as soon as possible. So if you do have a system that kind of has more of like a self-serve model, ask that enterprise customer to sign up so you can kind of kick off that vetting process. Ask a bunch of questions. I definitely agree. I've had a lot of places I've worked where you do have the deliverability team who's kind of like signing off on that, but you want to do that early because you don't want to upset the prospect who might go have some bad word of mouth. You also don't want to waste your own sales team's time, your internal folks' time when they're trying to kind of do a vetting. And then it's like, well, we've already put 20 hours into this deal and now you're telling me no. Like that is not going to make anybody involved very happy. So I think it's super important to have those people involved very early.
It's just burning resources, right? If you do it too late. So
yeah,
maybe you want to move on to the onboarding process. I don't know. So
read in my mind. Absolutely. Yep.
Maybe you have the perfect customer, which was not silly tender, and with a really good reputation. But you said at the beginning, Lauren, you're going to roll out the red carpet. How are you going to roll out the red carpet?
For sure. Yeah. And I think, you know, as with the vetting process, there are differences that you're going to see between like a freemium or a self-serve onboarding and the enterprise type. You know, for example, do you need an onboarding manager? For self-serve, I would say no, because in most cases, you're not going to be able to scale that unless you're charging for services, right? The math just doesn't make sense as you kind of continue to go up. But on the enterprise side, I do think you absolutely want to have, you know, an onboarding manager involved for a couple of reasons. And the first would be, you know, you want to give that new customer that your sales team spent, you know, so much time trying to kind of bring in a really good start, right? You want to start them off down this positive fat path that's fully introducing them to all the best features of your platform. You know, maybe even kind of craftily steering them away from ones that you know aren't so amazing or awesome yet. You know, you want to get them sending as quickly as possible so that they can really kind of start to get comfortable with your tool and not start looking backwards and kind of thinking about their past ESP as another option. You know, really just keep them sending, right? Give them a good experience. You know, that migration process is never fun for really anybody. Even when it goes well, it's still kind of a lot of work, but it doesn't have to be miserable. And that's where the onboarding manager is going to come in. And I think the second reason for this is, you know, you want to make sure that you get that onboarding done correctly. So if they stumble, they don't take a bunch of other customers with them. And a quick example of this, at a past ESP that I was working for, we had an onboarding manager that was supposed to be assigned at the beginning of every case. But of course you get, you know, a couple of those really small deals. They can't afford the onboarding, you know, costs and all these things. So the salesperson would comp that, they would take that off. But what was happening is then we weren't assigning an onboarding manager to the, you know, to the case because they weren't paying for it. Then no dedicated IPs were getting assigned. So then you've got all these really high volume customers that are sending from your shared pools. Nobody realizes it for maybe 2 or 3 months. You wait until there's some sort of problem with your shared pools because of that sender or who knows what's happening. And that's when you realize and you're like, oh, now we have to go back to this enterprise level customer and tell them that they're going to have to go through a warm up 2 or 3 months into their contract with you. So it's kind of making sure that you're getting all of those really important steps done ahead of time. And if you can't automate it, if you can't have this really awesome process, make a process to kind of double check on things like that, right? Make sure that every customer that comes in has a dedicated IP and is following all the processes that they're supposed to be. So I think that's super important on that one. I guess what, you know, maybe we should switch over to automation here as well. I'm going to throw this one out to you, Raymond and Jacob. Both of you, you can kind of answer whoever wants to. Do you think there are parts of the onboarding experience that can be automated?
Yeah, if I can have a try at that, like if you have the onboarding completed and you are getting to the sending stage, there's, I think, a lot of things that you can automate to do at least some pre-filtering. So we have been talking to like bigger ESPs also, that onboarding, they had that perfectly set up for them. And then the client starts to send with a completely different email address. So a completely different domain. And the domain was like in a lot of block lists already. So after the vetting, all the things that that customer is using, and you can think sender domains, but also the tracking links that they are using. Are they using a custom tracker, a branded tracker? Is the brand even mentioned in the tracking? So there's a lot of things where after you do that, and that's part of the continuous onboarding process, basically what I always try to suggest people. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can automate, and basically if you see red flags there, either pause the sending, reach out to the customer. Hey, is this really what you're wanting to do? Or the tracker that you're using, should it not have your brand name in there or a subdomain of your brand? You're basically you're advertising your brand and not like an ESP's homebrew tracker system, right? So it's also part when a brand moves from an ESP to an ESP, you don't want to start all over with new tracking. So I always suggest if you do tracking, basically the first thing you do is brand your tracker domain so you can also track that along. Just like the sending domain that you likely not start over with when you switch ESPs. So there's, yeah, I think there's a lot of data points that you can really automate, and you should like do that in the background. See if they added new sending domains. If you are doing that, some of the ESPs are not even checking what they're sending from, but it is an important part. Like if there's account takeovers, so somebody basically hijacks a nice email list which you have for another customer, then you want to basically be aware that this is happening, and automated processes could help you big time there.
We got one question related to that. I actually consider that answered. If you recommend keeping the existing domains and if it's possible to transfer domain reputation. Right.
Yep. Yep. And I also recommend, like, if you start a new campaign for, let's say, a sub product or a new product that you're launching as a company, some of them are like hot, fresh, new product.com because, well, we have this hot new, but that's not a brand. So you basically it should always be linked to your brand, I think. But yeah.
I would probably go back to where Lauren pretty much started this this onboarding question, and that is, or the topic, and that is, once the customer has signed, they're very eager to start sending, and that causes most of the trouble, at least in our case, when they feel like, oh, we've spent 6 months negotiating the deal and getting all of this done. Now we've made the decision, we want to start sending today. And that's where the mistakes happen, because suddenly they don't think about, oh, before we start sending, we need to transfer our suppression list, to make sure that we don't send to unsubscribe people by mistake. This is where mistakes happen the most, and it's really important to have some processes that enforce setup of this information, because of course it's a very simple and automated to make sure that the sending domains are being checked, that they're not on blacklists, that that they're aligned, etc., that DKIMs are in place, that everything is set up from a technical perspective. That's very, very simple from my perspective, but from the marketer's perspective, they want to start sending. They don't care about these technical intricacies. They care about, hey, I have the tool, I can, I have the WYSIWYG editor, I can create a campaign, start sending. And that's where we have couple of backstops. First off, when we onboard a customer, every single campaign has to go through manual approval, just to make sure that they don't rush things. And, you know, please feel free, send it, except it will wait for a human to look at it and check it out to make sure that you're not ruining your reputation on day one, right? And it's often, it could be small mistakes, like, you know, they haven't imported their unsubscribes, or they haven't set up the data sources to do the data integration automatically, but just, you know, imported some old CSV file or an Excel file manually just so they can start right away. And we, you know, the human factor here is very strong. It will check for this stuff, but also for stuff that is not really incorrect, but especially with enterprise customers who are dealing with lots of markets, they often, you know, prepare 5 campaigns for 5 different markets, and they forgot to translate everything, or they forget to update the links to go to a specific language website. You know, so mistakes pile up. Human is there to check it, verify it, make sure that it's correct. And if it's not, and if you know, they decide that, you know, day one we will start with 500,000 recipients, our team will not let it through. So
that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, my biggest takeaway there is almost like guardrails. Like, you want to build in, whether those are human guardrails that are kind of slowing people down and making sure the process is followed as you need it to be, or there's automation in place, right? So like, maybe you have, especially if you have a self-serve type of model, maybe you have some rate limitations that are based on the sign-up vetting risk score that you see coming in the door. Maybe there's some automation to remove those rate limits when you start to see customers sending with better, you know, with good statistics, or reaching certain volume thresholds or time thresholds. You could probably automate your shared IP pool assignments. And so figure, you know, maybe you have all customers starting on a new customer IP pool so that you can kind of vet them out and see how they are as a sender. And then after some certain amount of time or some action or some level in their stats, you move them to one of your reputation-based shared pools, or you just move them to a general shared pool that says, we know that there's not a lot of risk here, those folks are good. So there's a lot of things you could do. You could maybe automate your IP warm-ups to help kind of ramp people up a little bit slower. You could send notifications to your team. I think the trick is, yeah, just find ways to keep eyes on everything that's happening on your platform in some way or another, perhaps. All right, cool.
That's
all right,
essentially what we do. Like, it's you have to keep an eye on them, not only during pre-vetting, you know, do all the checks, and during onboarding, but even after that, because, you know, ultimately people change in the companies, and suddenly a new marketer comes in and he hasn't been trained, he hasn't been looked in on how things work, so he pulls some database that he thinks, oh, we have 1 million emails here, let's use it, right? And that's where the problem starts. So that's another place where an automation that looks at patterns and looks at, you know, deviation from the usual volumes will help. And that's what we do. If we see that deviation, we will stop that. And even if that customer has been approved for years and suddenly there's a massive deviation, it will be subject to manual approval.
So guys, what do you think about the difference between the CRM and the sending system, or if it's a different system, which system should be more relevant, or which should be the guiding system?
Well, I believe that the ESP should be the source of truth about the consent, about, you know, subscribe, unsubscribe, you know, what's the level of consent in here. And there must be an integration with the CRM, etc. But the truth should lie with the ESP, because the ESP gets most of the signals, right? We get the unsubscribes from from the content, from the list unsubscribe header, through FBLs, etc. So the amount of information that we as an ESP receive is much larger than what the CRM gets through maybe a phone line that somebody calls in and says, hey, I want to unsubscribe, or from a website where they can set up their preferences and, you know, change that they want to unsubscribe. You know, not that many people do that on the website. Way more do it directly from an email that they just received and they don't want to receive any more. So in my opinion, the source of truth should be the ESP. And if you're using multiple ESPs, then you have to make sure that you synchronize the data across the ESPs. And if you have other sources like a CRM, you need to make sure that you push it to your ESP.
Yeah, and we've seen it go wrong more than once, where a big brand basically changed ESPs, did not really know that the ESP had a lot of their emails suppressed because of unsubscribe and bounces. And if you just move without synchronization, you basically get back to zero again with your sending reputation. But because the next run you do at your new ESP will have a lot of bounces going on. So synchronization between whatever your ESP is doing for you with the unsubscribes is a really important part. You could lead your CRM make leading if you have multiple sources, but it is all depending on the synchronization between those two.
Yeah, and one important thing is that, you know, and brands often forget about this, but it's your data it's the brand's data, not the ESP's data. The brands should always have the data, right? Whether it's used as a source of truth or not, doesn't matter. They always must have that data. They always must have that information. If they don't, they will get into trouble. And we've seen there are like ESPs or agencies that use different tools that will just use that information as a bargaining chip. You want to leave? Well, you can, but we are not giving you your unsubscribes. And, you know, it sounds terrible, but the reality is you better prevent this from happening by having that data on hand all the time.
And I have one question for you until maybe you want to wrap up with the second part of that webinar. When leads are coming up and let you know they're going to move ESPs because their deliverability is bad at the moment, what questions should be asked, answered to avoid I'm not inheriting the bad practices that have been the reason for the former deliverability issues? I think that's a good one to wrap it off.
I like that. Yeah, I think the first question is almost just ask them, like, what do you think is your problem? Like, kind of what do you think might be going wrong? Because in some cases they might have done some investigation and figured out that something's wrong. But if they're saying my deliverability is bad, that's the reason I'm switching, the chances are they don't understand that they're the ones who mainly own their sender reputation. And as Jacob mentioned, your data quality is like a big part of that sender reputation. So I guess I would probably ask questions like, you know, what type of mail are you sending? So you can kind of get an idea of what the engagement should be. What is the quality of the data, or maybe what are the practices that you use to collect your email addresses? So from there, you're actually looking to see, do you get an opt-in? Do you have multiple places where you're collecting data that might have different, you know, varying levels of quality, or is it all just coming in through the main door and that's easy to figure out? What is the peak daily volume that you're sending, and how often do you send? So you can kind of get an understanding of, are they just, you know, only sending to people once a month, once a quarter, once a week, or are they pummeling them with 6 emails per day? And that's maybe part of the reason they're having a deliverability problem. You know, so I think it's, you kind of want to just get into some of those bits and pieces. Obviously, you want to ask about their metrics, so figure out what their engagement is. So like, not only are you having bounces, but do you see a lot of opens and clicks, or do you see a whole bunch of unsubscribes and complaints, and then not a lot of kind of, you know, positive engagement at all? So those are some of the things I think I I would ask. Anything else from you fellas?
Yeah, I mean, it could, you need to know more about like the specific case to basically be able to answer that. It could even be that the example that you had earlier, that you have a big client that is on your shared pool, and your shared pool has issues at the moment. So that might also be the moment that they say, well, this CSP is not working for us. We want something with better deliverability because we are in the wrong IP set from them. And yeah, you need to know a lot more. Usually it's not the ESP, but you know, that's only what I see. It's usually your own data that you basically need to circle back to and see, like, did we really get consent, or are we still using like addresses that subscribe to something that we sold them 10 years ago, or should we like, well, rethink the whole set that we are sending to every time? If those customers are not engaged, is it really a customer? You know, so
Right.
yeah.
And I think, Raymond, you already
think
slipped right into the last part of the webinar, the continuous vetting, actually, or the continuous monitoring of the reputation of customers. So, guys, I don't know if it's actually the same metrics you're looking at for pre-vetting, or what exactly are you looking at in order to know if maybe it was not silly sender before, but someone turned into silly sender, and you need to be aware, right, to protect those other guys who are sending from your platform.
Yeah, I think
How do you do it?
I would say that one thing that could really help with during the onboarding, you know, could help during the continuous vetting, to ask a simple question. Ask your customer whether they know what they want to improve. And if that answer is simply, oh, the deliverability, then there's something wrong. But if they have an idea of what they're doing wrong when it comes to their marketing strategy, that they know that, okay, so in the coming months, we would like to streamline our subscribe process, right? Or we would like to improve our engagement data use, you know, then they have an idea. But if all they believe is what we're doing is fine and we're just keep sending, then there's going to be a problem sooner or later.
What do you guys think? What are you looking at?
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty basic, my approach to that. Like, if you have a customer list, could be a car, could be a holiday that you booked somewhere. If I get like an email, that might work. But if I did not respond for like 8-9 years, then that list should be dealt differently with. And there's not like a simple answer like, is there like a standard recipe? No, there's not. During COVID, we have seen a lot of branches where an email list, which usually was used like once a year, now is used every 3 years. And the metrics changed for that. While 3 years is a pretty long time, it happens. So, for example, in the Netherlands, there was like every end of the year, we do something with fireworks. So people send out emails like, hey, you want to buy firework? But that didn't happen 2 years due to COVID. So if you want to do something with that, don't bother with me. I'm not buying anymore. But there's a lot of metric around that, and yeah, it does not even have to do with vetting, but basically you will engage with customers that are happy with your product and that want to buy or want to use or want to. There should be engagement, and that's basically what your clients, they should know what the engagement is, what they are looking for. and that's not just sending to everyone they ever knew, right? So yeah, happy customers really helps with whatever you try to sell them, right?
Yeah, and I think, like knowing we have a lot of probably ESP kind of folks that are chiming in. I feel like, it's, you want to make sure, like, it's like you've got different teams within your company that all need to sort of be looking at different metrics. So maybe your customer facing teams, like if you've got a CSM or a TAM who's working directly with that customer, they might be focused on the more positive signals, like, how is your performance? Are you hitting the goals that you're looking to get? Like are things looking good essentially, right? Are you reaching your ROI? Are you getting those conversions, whatever you're looking for? But like the deliverability compliance teams are probably looking at more negative data, like are you seeing a bunch of spam trap hits? Are you seeing high complaints from somebody? Are you seeing high bounces? Something that just sort of looks abnormal based on their current stats, right? So like, at SocketLabs, we have something called a stream score, which is kind of trying to bake all that stuff in. So it's a lot like the validity sender score, but it's using first party data as well, right? So we've got your sending statistics, we've got your Google Postmaster, your SNDS, as well as a whole, I think there's probably about 35 different signals, but we're trying to kind of look at the risk of what's happening. Like, are you chugging along? Did your stream score fall off a cliff? What was the reason for that? Was it an authentication issue that's maybe easy to fix? Is it a data quality problem or a sign up problem? Kind of what are the signals that kind of alert you to there is a problem, but what is driving that problem? So I think that's the trick, is for when you're doing monitoring across your entire platform, you need to be able to kind of catch that stuff quickly before it impacts your shared pools, before it impacts that big customer that you care so much about. So I think it's just staying ahead of your data, making sure that you've got some place on your platform that you can kind of monitor everything at a high level, and then be able to jump in quickly when you're like, oh gosh, that doesn't look good, something changed for the worse. And I think that goes back to the idea of, if you're doing a good vetting, great, but if you are kind of just letting customers do whatever they want after they get on the platform, you're going to see some things. So I think you just need to always be paying attention at every stage, essentially.
Right. There was actually coming an analogy to my mind with you talking about that. It's something we use at the CSA at many presentations. So it's actually, to me, like if you go into a club, there's a bouncer, right? So he'll check your shoes, he will check your ID, he will check everything. And then you're in, good. But there are like people on the dance floor, at maybe the red carpet has been rolled out. You've been shown the menu with the drinks. Maybe you had your first drink. So this is the onboarding process, right? So you're introduced well into the scene. But then there should be someone like in the club looking at you and looking at, like, if you sell drugs, or if you get a little too excited at the bar, stuff like that. This is also very relevant, because if he's not there, then it will be a drug dealer club, and there will be more drug dealers coming, but no students anymore, or no, I don't know what, but it's just this, I think it's this 3 steps process, which will probably, I don't know, maybe that's the last question for today, which will never end, right? It's ongoing.
Yeah, it is. And to that same analogy of the club, if you drink too much, people do crazy stuff also, right? So, and that might also be the same with, hey, I sent this few million emails. Let's send 5, because with 1 million emails, I get like this sales going up. Let's try more. And it's like, more is not always better.
No. I think that's a really good finish for this session. More is not always better.
I would add one thing, and that it's the difference between what marketers think is driving their business and what is actually driving their business. As Raymond said, more is not always more, but also when you look at the data, they often forget that there's the email engagement, and then there's the branding engagement, and they mix the two together. Like, just because the person keeps shopping on your site, it doesn't mean that they like your emails. So don't confuse the website visits with the data about email opens and clicks. And that is sadly happening a lot, especially with the current CDPs and multi-channels, where marketers are just using everything they get and put it into one pile and say, oh, this is an engaged customer, and forget where that engagement came from.
Yeah, don't overdo it.
Right. Don't get too excited, right?
Yes.
Don't get too excited. Nowhere. Mike has joined, so I guess this, yeah, we're on top of the hour. And from my side, already a huge thank you to Jakub, Raymond, and Lauren for moderating. It has been fun. We have accidentally all dressed in blue. Well, Mike and myself not accidentally, but we're all dressed in blue. So that's the Blue Women in Blue group for today. Thank you a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you also from my side. And yeah, keep an eye on our website and our LinkedIn profile for further webinars. We have some webinars during the next months. And yeah, thank you again for your time today, and hopefully see you soon. Have a nice day.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.